Welcome into the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Community Bank. Veritex Community Bank and the TCU Horned Frogs make quite the team. Veritex specializes in business banking, commercial loans, small business lending, treasury management, and mortgage all throughout DFW and the Houston area. If you're looking for the best bank to bank with, that's Veritex Community Bank. You can learn more about them and their services at veritexbank.com. That's VERITEX.com. Or reach them at 833-VERITEX. Jamie Plunkett, Marshall Newhouse, Coach David Bowden here on the set of the pregame show with our usual very special first guest of the show, Athletic Director Jeremiah Donati. JD, it's good to see you, man.
Happy to be here. Always, we've started quite a tradition.
I love the tradition. I hope we keep it rolling. But, man, I got to ask you right out of the gate here. First college football playoff rankings came out this week. I know the football team is less interested in all of that, but TCU fans were pretty up in arms over the week as TCU came in at number 7. What was your impression of these initial college football rankings?
You know, I wasn't surprised. And to be honest, I found out about it on Twitter. I was busy Tuesday night at my daughter's soccer practice. And so, you know, it's early and they got to have stuff to talk about. We knew when you start the season as far back as we did, you know, and all those teams have been in front of us. So, look, we just got to win. And we got to win today. We got to beat Texas Tech or none of this stuff matters. But I wasn't surprised. You know, you could get into us versus Clemson or Alabama and that stuff, but it's just premature for that. We got to win or it doesn't matter.
Speaking of things that kind of don't matter when it relates to things on the field, there's a lot of hubbub this offseason about specifically ticket sales and attendance for this specific game. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about the big thing that was made of it and how not big of a thing, how normal it is, and how things are going to go today.
Well, nothing like a friendly rivalry to stir up. So, look, I mean, to your point, Marshall, obviously Texas Tech fans were upset that we weren't going to sell them single-game tickets. But it's like I tell everyone, you know, I don't work for Texas Tech. I work for TCU. And so it's my job to ensure we give our fans and we give our student-athletes as much of a home field advantage as possible. And we've done that this year. So, you know, ticket sales went great. We're going to have a big-time purple crowd, and that's what's important. That's what's going to get the guys the home field advantage we want. So, you know, any good rivalry is going to have things they want to chat about, and, you know, it's kind of died down, and, you know, we just move on.
Yeah. We heard from the school out west and their complaints, but what does this rivalry mean for you and this fan base, Jeremiah? Tell us a little bit about just you know, the rivalry overall for you.
Well, it's a traditional rival, right? I mean, there's only a few teams, you know, the Texas Tech, the Baylor, Texas, that I would call, you know, even SMU to our traditional rivals, where you've played them, you know, a number of times. And so we go way back in the Southwest Conference with Texas Tech. It's important for us. It's one of the things in the new Big 12 conference that, you know, we wanted to make sure that we play them. They would say the same about us, and that also goes with Baylor and even Houston too. So we feel like these Texas rivalries date way before the Southwest Conference. You know, those are important. So we always love playing them. We know they're going to give us our best shot, and we're hoping to get after them today.
You mentioned Twitter earlier, and you're pretty outspoken on social media. I think it's fantastic, and I, you know, the fans love it. I get the sense that your athletic personnel appreciates you having their back. What gives you the confidence? Because it's not like that with every athletic department. You know, to get out there and you know, kind of have the backs of your fans and your personnel.
Well, thanks for saying that, David. I mean, look, there's nothing more important in my role than to support our student athletes, and so sometimes that comes with defending our home court or home field, but I want our fans to know, I want our staff to know, and I want most especially our student athletes and coaches to know that I got their back. And so I don't mind getting after opposing fans to an extent. And at the end of the day, you know, you just try to keep it light and have some fun. I mean, there's a lot of anger out in the world right now, and, you know, hopefully sports can be kind of an escape from some of that stuff, because I know there's some hard times out there. So, and yeah, we try to have fun at the end of the day with them.
Oh, we love it and appreciate it for sure.
You talked earlier just now about expanding the Big 12, and also that comes with that our media rights. And talk to us a little bit about the newest news on that front, both commissioner of the Big 12 and kind of your hands that were involved in that, or the talks that you were involved with.
Well, you know, I wasn't involved in the negotiations, but I would tell you that our play, TCU's play, has had a lot to do with getting ESPN and Fox really excited about the future of this conference. And so, you know, really excited that some of the members going forward, the Baylors, the Oklahoma States, Kansas State have had a really good years, TCU obviously, And so that matters as you're going through this negotiation. So we've all had a hand in it. The timing of that's been really good. Kansas as well. They've seen their football team, kind of make a complete turnaround. So it's really exciting for us because it stabilizes the conference, and Yormark did that. But it really it gives us more viability. It just puts us in a real position of strength. So we're really excited. I know I speak for the continuing 12 members that we're just really excited that Brett was able to pull this off in such a short amount of time.
The continuing 12, I like that.
You've been teasing some things on social media as well. I'm sure the media deal is a nice little boon for some of the projects that you have planned down the road here on campus as well. But Jeremiah, we've been talking all year about how the momentum is building, how things are going well for the program. I've got to say, it's a really good year to be a hoodie in Fort Worth, Texas, too. The swag that Sonny Dykes and this team are coming up with this year, it's just off the charts, man.
You know what's funny is I was thinking about this literally the drive in here today. Sonny told me we were talking about before we even played a game. We were talking about, kind of what you like to wear in the sidelines. We were just casually chatting one day in his office, and he goes, if it were up to me, I'd wear a hoodie every single day of my life. He said this back in February. And he said, one of the things I liked about Cal was the weather there. It was hoodie weather every single day. If you've been to the North Coast of California, that's kind of how it's like. Well, this is definitely hoodie weather, right? Yeah. And so, my hunch is that these guys are going to keep pouring them out. So it's exciting. Our fans get behind it. A lot of this stuff is team issued because I'm getting my direct messages on Twitter getting blown up with how do I buy this? And unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for that because this is really for the players and the coaches. But we are working on some stuff to make some of this a little more available to the fans.
Well, look, it's honestly for the best that my wallet can't get those hoodies right now. Like, my bank account would be crying, and my wife might be as well. Jeremiah, thanks as always for stopping by the pregame set. Elvis Gallegos, sideline reporter for TCU football, is going to be here next as the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Bank rolls on. Welcome back into the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Community Bank. Jamie Plunkett here alongside Marshall Newhouse, Coach David Bowden. And our next guest here on the show this morning, a member of TCU Spanish Radio, Elvis Gallegos, former TCU Horned Frog safety as well. Elvis, thanks so much for joining us on set today.
Absolutely, man. Excited. What a day. Beautiful weather. Frogs on fire. Let's do it, baby.
The Frogs are absolutely on fire, even though it's a little chilly outside. They're sitting at 8-0. Seventh in the conference, or seventh in the college football playoff rankings right now. Elvis, as you kind of think through the first 9 weeks of this season, what has gone right for TCU football, and how did they get to this point?
Man, that's a great question because I think we all realized the talent that was here, right? I mean, we knew we had the guys. We had some great dudes. on both sides of the football. It just, you didn't know how long it was going to take to click.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it had to be the right guy, the buy-in, the culture to get guys to play with maximum effort, that right attitude, the togetherness that I think you're seeing. So it's the culture that I think that's what's really got these guys where they're at. But, man, the dudes have been there, right? We've seen that for a while. But what I love, too, it's a week-to-week mentality. I mean, I don't think these guys are getting overwhelmed by the spotlight. I don't think they're feeling the pressure. You guys are at practice. Coach ain't getting too high or too low. I mean, it's just the next game. It's the next opponent. And I think that same mentality today should get us to another win.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about Tech's defense. I think their defense is still formidable. Like, they've had a weird year. They've had a lot of offensive struggles that have put the defense in tough spots. They have a very low turnover margin, maybe one of the worst in the country. Talk to us about the defense and their strengths. I would say particularly D-line, our former teammate, Coach Z's coaching them up. They're formidable, and if you allow them to get after the pass rusher, they will.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Marshall. You know what I think is you got to take a look at their schedule first. Man, these guys, when you had to play Houston, North Carolina State on the road, that was one of the top teams in that ACC. They've had to play some tough offenses. What I look at, what I think they've done, man, I'm going to shoot you straight. I think they've overcomplicated things on defense. This is a group that if you watch them on film, sometimes it's like they're thinking too much. They're not reacting. They're having to check. They're having to. And I was brought up that knowledge is confidence. Confidence allows you to play fast. Yeah. You got to know what you're doing, but you need to kind of simplify things. They've had a new staff. They've had to overhaul things, new terminology, but they got some dudes. Yeah. That kid on the front, I mean, that Wilson kid, that's a potential first day round kind of guy. Yeah. So Big Z's got some good dudes. A Meriwether kid can play. Yeah. I personally think if they were to simplify things, they'd be a lot better. I mean, you got to be careful about making those guys think too much. But man, hopefully we put them in position today where we complicate a lot. Mm-hmm. Kind of what Baylor did, kind of confuse them a little bit. But yeah, that front is really good.
Yes. You talk about simplifying things, and I think defense coordinator here for the home team, Joe Gillespie, has done a great job of simplifying this defense and allowing them to play fast, just like you talked about. They've had some movement in the secondary with some guys getting banged up. They're going to get, looks like they're getting Millard Bradford back today. I think is going to be a big help. What's the challenge today against this offense with potentially three quarterbacks? They're all pretty similar. Obviously we expect Morton to be the guy, but they've talked about playing three guys. What does that do for secondary in particular?
Yeah, I think the Morton kid's special. We were watching film in Oklahoma State when he lit it up and he made some plays that they got something here. This kid's got a chance to be really good at Tech. He's the type of guy that could take over a game. If he's locked in, he's that good. Yeah. Now he's a freshman, so I think you could confuse him a little bit. What we've done really well to all this is simplifying stuff. Man, I think what's going to be key for these guys today is to tackle well. We didn't do that well last week, and I think at times it's shown up poorly on the defensive end. If we can tackle well, if we can line up, communicate's probably going to be first because you want to eliminate big plays. But I think what these guys want to do is get the ball out quick. They want to go fast, and I actually think fast is okay for us because we don't overcomplicate things. We're going to run the same things. At times they use the word vanilla, and I don't like to use that word, but it's good for us because we're going to line up. We're not going to overcomplicate things. Yeah. And so if you communicate, these guys are going to try to go fast. It plays into our hands. I personally think if we could tackle well, if we could communicate well, I think you'll eliminate some big plays and force these guys to march. And when you got a freshman quarterback, if it is a freshman guy, I think that's when he'll run into some mistakes.
Yeah, and they practice against that tempo every day, Elvis, right? And all of a sudden you get in a situation where it's hurry up and punt, right? And that's what you want. And honestly, these guys don't punt too much, right? As we know, we've talked about throughout the week. So,
all right, Elvis, thank you so much. We're going to let you go. We've got we know you've got a busy day today on the call. You can listen to Elvis on TCU Spanish Radio calling the Horned Frogs against the Red Raiders. We're going to take a quick break here on the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. And when we get back, TCU head coach Jamie Dixon will be on set with us. Welcome back into the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Community Bank. Jamie Plunkett alongside Marshall Newhouse and Coach David Bowden. As the guests keep rolling here on the pregame show, TCU basketball kicks off their season on Monday, so head coach Jamie Dixon is here with us. Coach, thanks for stopping by the set this morning. Appreciate you.
My neighbor, JW, told me to stop by.
No asking, just tell him.
Your neighbors talk. You never know what they may prank with. They may pill on you. So,
right? It makes you less inclined to answer the doorbell, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, Coach, your guys kick off the season on Monday night here at Schollmeyer Arena against Arkansas Pine Bluff. How ready are you now that you guys have been working through all of fall? We know we've talked about expectations. We've talked about this team being prepared. But now that the season is knocking at the door, how ready are you for the season to start?
You're ready, and then something changes the day, and we're still figured out with the Damian situation. So we've got some things up in the air. We've had some guys miss some practices, but the last couple of days we've had everybody out there, and we've had some really good practices. So it's 80. I mean, we're at 80 practices so far.
Yeah.
If you count the summer, the fall, I like to count those out because we really treated them as a practice a day. And so we got a lot done. We got a lot of stuff in. We got returning guys, no question about it. We've looked good in our two exhibition and our scrimmage. So we're good. But, things change and you get some banged up guys and you're not playing as well. But we've had a very good summer and a very good fall, no question about it.
Coach, you talked about returning guys. There's a lot of seniors, veteran guys with a lot of reps on this team. The best teams I was ever on were more player-led. They're self-coached.
Right.
How do you feel they are at this point as far as, holding each other accountable, taking a little bit less off your plate, and you trusting them to go do things on their own?
Well, that's kind of what I'm hearing about the football team. They're an older team.
Yes.
They've got a lot of fourth, fifth-year guys, and that's what you hope you get to. I had that at Pitt. We just kind of lost maybe a couple guys each year, but we always had that returning group, that core, that people that understand it, and really they do the coaching. I mean, your best teams, the players do the coaching, and the accountability is held there by the players. I feel we're at that point. I really do. It's fine line with us because you got 12 guys, 12 scholarship guys, so there's always a guy in, maybe a guy out. You don't have that whole group out there, but again, it's a group that has been challenging each other. We've been good in the weight room. We've been good in conditioning. We've taken care of business off the floor too. Classroom, we're doing very well too. High GPAs, highest we've ever had. We've been in the goals, been 3.0. We've been right in that vicinity. So, this is a great group. There's no question
very
about it.
focused.
Yeah, and you can see them. They're out here. Our players are engaging. They're always talking to students, and I think they've really brought the students involved in athletics as we saw last year.
Love it.
Coach, you mentioned the football program, and you've been around, you've been in some different places. How important is it for you to have such a good relationship? I know you have a personal relationship with Coach Dykes, but also just between the two programs and recruiting and those things and sort of, feeding off each other.
That's what I love about college. I love being around all the students first off, and then the other sports. And what I like about our place is we have the weight room. All the sports are in there. Training table. You see the equestrian team. You see the football team. So it's just I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy it. I saw Tony Dorsett, a friend from Pittsburgh. He's here. His daughter goes to school
There
here.
we go.
And we were talking, and I just saw him a couple of weeks ago when I went back to Pittsburgh for the backyard brawl. But combining both is a good thing. I'm all for it. Good programs is a good thing for everybody. It just brings excitement, and obviously our excitement kind of started last year with the storming of the court, and now we're storming the football field.
Yeah.
So the tradition continues.
I love it.
All right, Coach. Well, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for stopping by. Good luck on Monday night. Pack the Schollmeyer out, folks, for the TCU Pine Bluff game. It's kicking off the Horned Frogs basketball season on Monday night. We're going to take a quick break here. We're actually going to kick it down to Ray Cartwright, our man in the field. He is out at the tailgates talking to some of you Horned Frog fans. Ray, take it away.
What's your score prediction for today's game?
45-27 Frogs.
Let's go, Frogs.
62 to 17.
62-17. Love it.
Frogs.
TCU 48, Tech 21.
Tech 21. Love it. Thanks.
I'm going 35-14 TCU.
I'm going to take 93-5 TCU.
93-5. We're running out of fireworks today, aren't we?
Sir. Yes, sir.
I'd say TCU 35, Tech 14.
I think it's going to be 56 to 38. Go Frogs.
Today I'm thinking 48
21.
We go 42-14 TCU.
I'm going to have to go 48-21.
48-21. Love it. Frogs all the way.
35-14 TCU.
Let's go, Frogs.
Welcome back into the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Community Bank. Jamie Plunkett alongside Marshall Newhouse and Coach David Bowden. Guys, we've had some really good guests on this morning already, but it's time to talk about some Horned Frog football as they take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders this morning. We had Elvis Gallegos on earlier, Marshall. He started to tell us a little bit about this Texas Tech defense, and maybe things are a little bit overcomplicated for them. They're finding themselves out of alignment here regularly. But as far as TCU's offense is concerned, facing that defense today, what are you seeing and what are you feeling?
Yeah, shocking. We have a game to play here in a couple hours. But yeah, TCU offense. Listen, the story of this year has just been getting this offense in a rhythm.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's taken a half. Sometimes it's taken a quarter, but they've always eventually gotten a rhythm, and when they're clicking, they can't really be stopped. I think today is about starting fast. This is an early kickoff, 11 a.m. There's still people in the stands who are wiping dust out of their eyes, getting coffee in their system, and for a TCU team that really has been punished in the polls by being behind, having to come back, starting fast is a really big thing today, and that starts with the offensive line up front. I will always talk about it because it stirs the drink, it rows the boat, it does all of that. The offensive line unit has played really well up to this point. They've got to continue to do that, but they've got to do it from the jump. They cannot have any delays, penalties. You can't, put pressure on Max and not let him get in a rhythm. The offensive line has to show up. Our running game has to impose itself early on this game. We've seen Texas Tech, a team that can score in bunches just like everyone else in the Big 12. Keeping them off the field is another form of defense. And our offense, as much as we can use explosive plays, can run the ball too. We can run the ball with the best of them, averaging over 200 yards a game. So I look for the offensive line, TCU to start fast, using the run game, using Max Duggan's legs, things like that.
Yeah, and you look at starting fast. They started fast offensively last week. I think they were sluggish on the defensive end, but part of that actually hurt the defense in a way, right? It's nice to score points, but when you're scoring at that pace, and your defense really isn't up to par, it can really kind of strain them. But for the TCU offense, I agree with you, and I think this Tech defense really has some holes. I think there's some quality players. We talk about the experience, especially along the front. There are 7 players in this 2D for Texas Tech that are, quote unquote, that super senior. Since that world event, everybody got an extra year, right? And so 7 of those guys, that's a lot of football behind them. But even with that, I think it's still a new staff. They're still trying to and they're doing a lot defensively. So with that, they voided some zones and coverages. They don't always gap out in the run game, and I think TCU can take advantage of that and just making sure that they keep tempo, they keep pace, and understand where those voids are because they're going to come today.
You know, it's really interesting because we talked on TCU's offense as far as that side of the ball. Sonny Dykes and Garrett Riley coming in and getting the most out of this group of players. Defensively for TCU, and it seems to be the same thing for Texas Tech. Oh, well, we just need to give these coaches a little bit more time, let them get their players in the system, get them coached up right. What changes in the how do you pivot around those sides of that conversation, and what goes into that?
Yeah, I think for Texas Tech, I think the difference between the two defenses, when you talk about, trying to warm up to this new staff, there's a huge difference. And we talked a little bit last time, last segment with Elvis about it, but TCU really does a nice job allowing these guys and freeing them up just to play, right? And you can do that when you just kind of, you have them either blitz, play man, drop 8, right? I know I'm oversimplifying things defensively, but essentially when you boil it down, those are the things that they're doing. Tech right now has been in, Jamie, you and I on Facing the Frogs looked at the first series last week, and in the first 5 plays, they're in 5 different defensive fronts. It's hard to, it's hard to get to know who you are when you're doing a different thing every single play. And so you have to have some identity. And I think defensively, they're struggling a little bit to find the identity out in Lubbock. But, again, don't discredit. They're a good coaching staff, really good players, as we talked about, and so the pieces are there. And which is scary, right? It's scary because they put it all together. This is absolutely a formidable defense.
You think about, too, the opportunity that TCU has today to move to 9-0 for the first time since joining the Big 12. That's a huge opportunity for the Horned Frogs, but it's going to take both sides of the ball, kind of as you said, Marshall, getting out to a really fast start, shaking the dust off, getting out there really quickly. Fortunately for TCU in that secondary, they're getting a really important player back today in Millard Bradford.
Yeah, Millard Bradford's a safety who can range the field, gives Coach Gillespie a lot of versatility, a lot of veteran leadership in the back end, and that this defense that we've seen has kind of sat back, allowed teams to drive. We call it bend, don't break, but it's really just simplifying the defense, letting guys fly to the ball, rally and tackle. And then what you're seeing, TCU might be the best team in the country at making adjustments on the fly, both after the first quarter and definitely at halftime. You're seeing a completely Jekyll and Hyde different defense after the team comes out at halftime. And a safety like that allows he's a coach on the field. He allows the scheme to kind of get conveyed to each level of the defense, and they get set faster. This Texas Tech offense is going to play fast. They're going to play turbo speed. And so getting a guy who can communicate with the rest of his defense, get everyone lined up, it'll put you in a position to win and play fast. That's what we want, is to play fast, match that tempo, because as we said earlier, tempo is good when it's working. When it's not, it is a hampering detail to the other side of the football.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. You talk about the communication piece. That person in the back end, sort of that umbrella of the coverage, communicating out is critical to have a guy like Bradford back. I also think just his skill set is important because that player in particular is asked to do so much in this defense. He's got to spin down and play zone underneath. He's got to play a deep third at times. He comes down and plays man-to-man. He blitzes. He's got to run the alley and tackle. I mean, this is a guy that's going to do a ton, and those guys are hard to find. And so they found something in Bradford early on. And I think that injury, we talked about them being a little bit sluggish last week. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think with Bradford off the field, you talk about communication, but along with his skill set, really sort of slows that down, this TCU defense. So I think today having him back will really kind of get this thing rolling again on defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you recall just a couple weeks ago when Bradford went down with that knee injury against Kansas, Joe Gillespie came out the next week, and you could see he was visibly disappointed about losing Bradford. He called him the field general. He said he's the guy that's out there getting, like you said, Marshall, everyone else is getting aligned because of Bradford understanding this defense, picking it up really quickly. And that comes just with seniority. You talked a lot about seniority on the Tech side of the ball defensively, but TCU's got some guys that have been around for a little while, and when those guys fall out of the starting role or they're not around as much on the field, then we've seen the result of that these last couple weeks.
Something I'll add to, if you're watching the game at home, a little football 101. On defense, a lot of these schemes, they're looking to the sideline. There are coaches who are signaling the plays, the fronts, the blitzes. You're going to see every member of the defense looking to a coach on the sideline. Pay attention. It's a big game of telephone. You're conveying signals and you're yelling to the best of your ability, but then it goes to a senior or a leader on the defense. Then it goes to the linebacking group, the defensive line. The faster you can do that, the more accurately you can do that, the better the team is in position to play fast. Mm-hmm. And with a guy who's a veteran who understands the scheme, he can be like the coach and can communicate and basically translate what's happening from the coach, from the sideline to the game. And with a team that's going so fast, that is crucial. You've seen play cards on wrists, but sometimes it's just signals, and sometimes all you can get out is a word. And the more you can convey with a word or few words, the better you are to play fast and be ready to go.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Marshall, especially against this high-tempo offense, right? How important that communication piece is, because, from the sideline onto the field. And a lot of times, too, a lot of that work, as you know, is done, during the week, right? So you can line up and they get certain personnel, and the defense knows a guy like Millard Bradford, keep going back to that, who's that field general, who's sort of that quarterback on defense, as is Max Duggan is on offense. He's a guy that, all of a sudden you get a certain personnel, a certain formation, and they know they have an automatic check. Or, hey, the second time they come out and empty with stack trips, we're going to go to this. And now you eliminate even one more layer of that communication because it's getting done on the field automatically. So I think, that prep work going into it and having those guys, Jamie, that you talked about that are older, more veteran, and then that communication piece, Marshall, I couldn't agree more. It's going to be critical today against this tempo because look, these fast offenses, they do simplify your defense typically, but if you can get ahead of it and they know what to check to and all the players on the field already know it, they don't have to worry about communication, that you can stay one step ahead or at least on par with the offense.
Yeah, so when you think too, now, all right, let's switch, right? We've talked a lot about senior leadership on both sides of these defenses, but TCU has a really important senior leader at quarterback in Max Duggan. He's starting to get more and more Heisman recognition. We're going to have Sam Kahn of The Athletic on. He's a Heisman voter. He's going to come on the pregame show in just a little bit to talk more about Heisman opportunities for Max Duggan. But as far as you guys have seen Max this year, when you consider what Texas Tech is presenting on defense with the complicated schemes, a ton of athleticism and talent and senior leadership, but just maybe the coaching isn't quite fully taken yet. What kind of opportunity does this present for Max Duggan today, not only in the game, but from kind of a national perception opportunity?
Well, listen, Max Duggan is as humble as they come, and I don't mean that flippantly. Like, there are guys who you might see that you say they're humble, that's kind of fake, it's kind of fraudulent, it's putting on the front. Max Duggan was the second-string quarterback coming out of camp this year. There's no way to lose your job. That's what he did. He lost his job to Chandler Morris. For Chandler Morris to then get hurt, you take over in the middle of the Colorado game and to go on this run to not remember where you came from. Yeah. So Max Duggan is aware as anybody else in the country about where he came from and what lies ahead. All that to say, he's deserved every bit of praise he's getting, but he's not going to his head. I think we can rest assured that every week Max Duggan is going to come to play. And you talk about a defense that is maybe overcomplicating things, missing gaps, missing zone voids. For one of the most explosive offenses in the country, led by Max Duggan, that has a chance to get ahead early, take advantage of these miscues, and continue to propel himself into the national spotlight. That's not what he cares about, but listen, with play, with winning, that's what comes with that, and it's well deserved.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think he's a guy that is probably the most prepared for this kind of moment of any quarterback in his spot. For the reasons you talked about, he's also obviously a son of a coach, but he carries himself almost like a coach. When I've never had a guy in at that age where any interview, whether it's a sit down with a newspaper, whether it's on camera, whether it's with us in the post game show, who has the right answer every single time, and it's genuine. It's not a canned answer. It's not something that, like you said, he's faking. That's just who he is. And so if there's ever been a guy that wouldn't let the noise get to him, it's Max Duggan. Yes. He blocks it all out. He's a team-first guy. He's constantly picking his teammates up. And why this matters, when you look at all these things, a teammate gets knocked down, he's got his hand out. He's the quarterback. It should be the other way around, right? If a guy blows a protection, he's hyping him up, patting him on the head, right? All those things matter in moments like this when you start getting that national recognition. You're on, the big ticket today, right, at 12 p.m. Nationally, right, 11 a.m. here, obviously. And he's going to get those eyeballs on him. But when you have that guy, like I said, he's already ready for that moment and just doesn't let it faze him at all.
He's authentic. He's humble. We've seen this year he's extremely capable of executing this offense, and he's got the Horned Frogs sitting at number 7 in the country, 8-0 on the season. We're going to take a quick break here on the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. When we come back, Melissa Treebwasser is in town. She's going to join us here on the set as we continue to break down the Horned Frogs versus the Red Raiders. Welcome back into the Frogs Today pregame show, live here at Amon G. Carter, presented by Veritex Community Bank. Folks, Veritex Community Bank and the TCU Horned Frogs make quite the team. Veritex specializes in business banking, commercial loans, small business lending, treasury management, and mortgage, all throughout DFW and Houston. If you're looking for the best bank to bank with, that's Veritex. You can learn more about Veritex services at veritexbank.com. That's VERITEX bank.com, or you can call them at 833-VERITEX. They're a member of the FDIC Equal Housing Lender. Jamie Plunkett here alongside Marshall Newhouse, Coach David Bowden, and FrogsToday.com staff writer Melissa Treebwasser made the flight in for this game this weekend. Folks, we've been breaking down TCU and Texas Tech all morning. I want us to talk, though, about some specific guys that we expect to have big days today. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Marshall, who's going to stand out today for you?
Well, it might seem like the obvious answer and the simple answer, but it's Quentin Johnston. But not for the reasons that you might guess, not for skill, not for talent. It's about health. And his health is prime to this offense, and him being able to be have the guy with the burst, the change of direction, the jump ball ability. Him being healthy and available today is going to be a big motivating factor for this offense, because he's Max's go-to guy. Third down, fourth down, he's a guy you can trust on one-on-one opportunities. He's a guy that we're now starting to use a little more creatively, motioning him into the slot, giving him opportunities to run and catch in the screen game. So him being healthy and be able to do what he does without thinking about it is going to let this offense kind of flourish today, with what we just talked about, Tech having a lot of holes in their defense from a scheme perspective, from an execution perspective.
Yeah, for me, it's Kendra Miller, and really the running game in particular. So extension of that offensive line. When I look at the tempo that Tech is going to try and do on this field today, if you can kind of shorten the game a little bit, because they're going to have their own version of tempo for TCU. But I think, running the ball, taking some time off the clock, and just kind of churning out yards are going to be just as important on a day like this, because when it comes down to it, TCU, I think, just has too much firepower on offense. And if you can get in a situation where it's back and forth, I think TCU wins that thing, outright. But if all of a sudden it's big play after big play, that kind of, you're not really playing to your strengths in that case. So I look for Kendra Miller to have a big day on the ground yet again. Not a shocker, right? Because when we look at these skills and look at these skill players, I mean, it's just unbelievable what this offense is doing each week.
Yeah, 5 100-yard games in the last 6. He had 130-plus rushing yards last year against Texas Tech. It's a pretty good pick. It's a pretty safe pick, Coach.
Yeah, I really went out on a limb there. You know what I mean? This is what you get here on the Frogs Today pregame show, these bold takes.
Hard-hitting analysis. Coach Melissa, what about you? Who's your offensive player?
I think we're looking to see Jared Wiley get back involved in the offense. He had a great game against Kansas State. We didn't see a whole lot of him against West Virginia. We kind of thought that this was the beginning of the breakout. But I just don't think Texas Tech has an answer for a 6'7" tight end.
Who
right?
does?
Yeah, exactly. So I think with the combination of Tech having a pretty good pass rush and the linebacking core being a weaker spot on their defense, this is an opportunity for Max Duggan to look for a guy he's comfortable with, a big target in the middle of the field, especially down in the red zone, scoring opportunities. I think we're going to see a lot of Jared Wiley early and often today, and he's going to be a difference maker for TCU.
I think you named my offensive player, by the way, Max Duggan. I think Max is going to have a really big day. And I was watching some of our other pregame
really
shows.
Out of
I know, hard-hitting
guys,
analysis here, Frogs Today pregame show. Presented by Veritex Bank. But, I don't think any of us have picked Max Duggan on offense to be the guy yet in a pregame show this year. Maybe it's just because it's so obvious that we just kind of omit him from the conversation. But Max Duggan has been the thing that's made this offense go all season long. Quentin Johnston wouldn't be having the season he's having. Jared Wiley wouldn't be having the season he's having. Kendra Miller probably would still be having the season that he's having, of course. But Max Duggan is responsible for so much of this offense. And I think that today he really has an opportunity to showcase his full skill set against a defense that's probably going to be overmatched. But, guys, obviously that's not the only side of the ball. We want to talk a little bit about defense, too. Marshall, who's your defensive standout for today?
Again, we'll stay obvious because there's not that many things. TCU's been very healthy up to this point. I'm not going to jinx it, but D. Winters, he's the guy in the middle of the field. He's our leading sack getter this year, and he kind of plays off the defensive line front. When they're slanting, when they're rushing 3, he's dropping an 8, but he's also the guy who's the first to kind of cover running back, cover the flats, things like that. And as we saw last week, TCU kind of a little slow getting started with tackling. And a guy like him is a guy that can get that started, making sure that you're wrapping up, getting guys to rally to the football. A guy like D. Winters is going to cause problem for Morton if he can just, deflect balls, be in the passing lane in the middle of the field.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to sort of piggyback off of that, but for a slightly different reason. I'm going to look at D. Winters and also Johnny Hodges, the two stacked linebackers, the two outside stacked linebackers, I guess the best way I can put it. And for this reason, Texas Tech loves to spread you out. That's not a novel concept, but really they're doing it for their run game. So they want to throw the ball over the yard now. I don't think that's what head coach Joey McGuire wants because he doesn't have the personnel to do anything else, right? And so we know Kitley, the offensive coordinator, he's a Cliff Kingsbury guy, so he is an air raid in his roots. But it's going to be interesting on how those two stack guys, do they declare and get out there and go defend that stuff, or do they hang back where they can fall back into the run fit? So I'm going to be really curious in watching those two and how they handle those spread formations when they really try and put a strain on it and get those receivers outside the numbers.
I love talking about the linebackers. I think that's a great call. But nothing happens with the linebackers if you don't get pressure from the front, yes. Right? I think today is the day that we get the Demonic Williams game.
Okay.
I think this is the one. Yep. I think that the Texas Tech quarterbacks are completely different, whoever we see on the field, or maybe all three of those guys, when they're under pressure. And especially Baron Morton is a young guy. So I think if Williams could have a big game in the middle, if he can draw a lot of attention, he can free up some of the edge rushers. Dylan Horton had a big game last weekend. Yep. This is a really big opportunity, I think, for Williams, the true freshman, to make a statement kind of a game and to really change what TCU is doing up in the trenches.
Yeah. I love the pick. We've seen the defensive line start to set things up these last couple of weeks, especially in second halves. Marshall, I think I cut you off.
No, you're good. I was literally just going to add, a guy like that, providing attention. Dylan Horton's come alive these last three games.
Yes.
And from a three guy, we're rushing three often. You don't always expect a lot of quick pressure. It's kind of coverage sack is what you're looking for. You're looking for guys contain a mobile quarterback. He's beating guys off their second and third step and getting right in the middle of the quarterback's comfort zone, and that stuff can throw an entire offense because if you got 8 guys in coverage, there's nowhere to go for the ball. So if he can continue to beat what we have talked about earlier this week is I think a mismatched, overmatched offensive line unit who struggled with a lot of defensive fronts this year. That's a huge, huge plus. It will allow their offense to not even get off the ground potentially if he can get consistent pressure. So Dylan Horton along with Demonic Williams, absolutely.
Yeah.
If I could, to kind of tie those things together, I look at, you talk about Dylan Horton, not only in the pass rush, but also he's done a really nice job of kind of squeezing that gap, keeping his outside shoulder free. And we talk about those linebackers, those two stack linebackers, he's given them clear reads, meaning he's not muddying the waters by kind of dipping his head in and out. He's able to kind of give a defined read and allow those linebackers to understand what gap they then have. They play off of that defensive line, and Dylan Horton, I think, has really done a much better job as this season gone on doing that as well. And so I think that's going to bode well for TCU today for sure.
We've talked about the defensive line. We've talked about the linebackers, but I want to talk a little bit about a guy who's coming back. We've already mentioned him here in the secondary, Millard Bradford. You might know him as Nook. He's a strong safety here for the Horned Frogs, and he's coming back today for the first time since he suffered an injury against Kansas. And what we saw in that Oklahoma game and in the first quarter of that Kansas game when Millard Bradford was on the field was a defense that was in position. They were fast to the ball. They were confident, and that kind of faded when he went out with that injury. We had some younger guys coming into the secondary who maybe weren't as commanding. They weren't that field general style guy. And that's been noticeably lacking for this defense the last couple of weeks. Yes, they've made some really good second half adjustments. Yes, they've managed to stay undefeated in spite of giving up some big plays here and there throughout these last few weeks. But getting Millard Bradford back is so critical to this secondary because it frees guys up. Just having him out there is going to make everyone else, Mark Perry, both cornerbacks, everybody else in that secondary is going to feel more confident knowing that Nook is back out there on the field. It's going to be an incredible boon for this TCU defense today, and I think it's going to be one of the key reasons they get off to a hot start.
You talk about his impact. Immediately when he went out in the Kansas game, what can we all name the pass play, the route system that causes TCU the most trouble? I would say it's the deep crosses off of play action. And they've been hit with that literally 4 to 5 times for explosive gains since Nook got off the field. So something like that is about pure communication. It's about passing off deep streaking receivers, and that is a guy who can get guys in the right position, but then communicate midstream in the middle of a play, be like, oh yeah, you stay there, or you come here, you stay, whatever. that was lost immediately, and you saw teams capitalize on that. So something like that, a very simple scheme, it's nothing new. If you can erase that, or if you can, mitigate that with just pure communication from an experience standpoint, it's a huge, great boon for the defense.
It absolutely is. And when you think about Texas Tech and Kitley on offense now, they've been game planning probably based on the film that they've seen from Kansas in the second half, from Oklahoma State and Kansas State, and from West Virginia as well. But now you've got another thing to consider as an offensive game planner, as an offensive coach. And that's going to change what Tech is able to do out there on the field today. It's going to make things a little bit more complicated for Bear Morton and for whatever Tech quarterback rolls out there. I think we're going to see all three of them today, frankly. But I think it's a really good addition for the Frogs. Let's pull back, though, because while the football team has said all week long that they are not terribly interested in hearing the national perspective of things, here talking about rankings, talking about potential bowls, playoffs, all of that kind of stuff. They're really incredibly confident and capable of keeping their heads down and maintaining their focus, which I think is incredible. But the fans for TCU have gotten fired up because the college football playoff rankings came out and TCU was number 7, behind one-loss Alabama, behind a Clemson team that has a lower strength of schedule, has a worse offense, has played from behind a lot this year, just like TCU, which was why TCU ended up ranked 7th in these first polls. But I want to hear from all of you. What was your impression of those rankings, and what do you think the national perspective is for the Big 12 right now? Marshall, let's start with you.
I'll just be honest. I give them nothing. They get none of my energy. Listen, you talk about, toxic people getting out of your life. I get the college football committee out of my life for now. Listen, we have all 8 years ago, feels like a long time. It was a long time, but it also feels like yesterday. TCU suffering what we think is just an injustice about being left out of the 2014 college football playoff. We know how this can go. We know without unspoken why things like that happen. So at this point, it just does you no good. Give it no energy. Cheer for the Frogs. Continue to support them, because they know, as well as what you should know, is that 8-0 doesn't matter if you're not 10-0, 11-0, 12-0. And so again, we'll continue to cheer for them. We'll keep our eye on it, but they get none of my energy. They're producing a show. They're looking for ratings. They're looking for talk. But at the end of the day, we have to give them no excuse to again, try to do us wrong, if you will.
What's so frustrating to me is that you have all of this emphasis on advanced metrics and stats, and people are looking at numbers, and then the committee is making decisions off of arbitrary things they're basically making up on a week-by-week basis. If you look at the national perception of the Big 12 this year, I would say it's overwhelmingly positive. This is one of the most balanced and competitive conferences from top to bottom in the country. I mean, you think Kansas always picked to finish near the end. They were ranked in the top 25 until injuries took them over. West Virginia, supposed to be one of the worst teams in the conference. They wouldn't beat Baylor a week and a half ago, who was predicted to win the conference. This is a well-coached, well-played, talented group of 10 teams from top to bottom. Apparently that doesn't matter to the playoff committee. But I think that at the end of the day, the thing that's most disappointing, I try not to give them much energy either. I like to be a positive person, Marshall. But when you look at the best win for Alabama is a 1-point loss to Tennessee, I think what they're telling us right now is that TCU has to be undefeated in the Big 12, win the Big 12 championship to have any shot at making the Final Four. And once again, that's the same injustice that we saw in 2014. Thank you for ruining my so far really happy morning by bringing that up, by the way. But I think that's just where we're at. We win out, it'll take care of itself.
Yes.
We're going to take a quick break as the band rolls by behind us here on the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. But when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation right here. So don't go anywhere. morning.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Gotta get the sun to move over here a little bit, warm it up.
Yeah, we got to get a little warmer over here. So, Sam, you are the resident tech expert at The Athletic. You focus on all things college football for the state of Texas, obviously also taking a look at the Big 12 as well. But from the time TCU hired Sonny Dykes last November to now, what has been your impression of his coaching time here at TCU?
I mean, it's nothing short of impressive because I expected them to be better under Sonny Dykes, and I love what they did with the staff. I love what they've done in the offseason with this program. And you knew the talent was here. I don't think there was a question. You look back at the 247 team talent composite, they've been third in the Big 12 for about 5-6 years in a row now.
Yeah.
So there are players here. You see it out there now. But what's impressed me is the resilience that this team has showed. The way they've been able to, even when they've dug themselves in the hole, the way they've been able to bounce back, the way the offense has been able to make just routine plays to get back into games, the way that the defense has been able to kind of buckle down and get stops late. And with a first-year team, you never really know because you don't know how much buy-in there is, but it seems like there has been buy-in from the start with this group, and it's translated on the field and the results.
Yeah, we talk about the perception of the Big 12 as a whole. You know, looking outward with, especially talking about college football selection committee, the playoff committee, we have seen objectively that the Big 12 has been maybe the second best conference head to toe. Why does that not seem to translate in a year like this year so far with how they're picking and ranking?
I think a lot of it has to do, and I hate to say it, but I think it has to do with branding. Like if TCU was Texas or if it was Oklahoma and they had the same resume that TCU had, I think they'd be a few spots higher in the rankings. I looked at Clemson sitting at number 4. Their FBS opponents have the same exact record that TCU's does.
Yeah.
They have the same number of wins over above 500 teams to this point. So their resumes are virtually identical, and yet Clemson is 3 spots ahead of TCU. I think it's just a national perception that the SEC and the Big Ten are where the elite teams are.
Yeah.
That's just how people view it. And the Big 12 has been looked at as a fun conference, but not necessarily a top-heavy conference, especially with OU being down. So I think, back to what I said, I think it's hard to say that branding or TCU not being a big national brand has something to do with it.
So you're telling me the selection committee, which has been told to view the rankings on a year-by-year basis, doesn't view things that way?
No, it's not necessarily that they don't view things. I just think it's an unconscious thing. Like,
right.
if it was, because look at the way that Alabama's resume has been justified. They had that win over Texas on the road, and they had a close loss to Tennessee. But then you hear the committee chair talking about TCU getting behind in games.
Yeah.
Well, Alabama was behind in the game
Right.
and they never crawled out of
Right.
the hole. And granted, it was the number 1 team in the country, but TCU has beaten ranked teams 4 straight weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And so the logic just never makes a ton of sense, and it's a subjective process by nature. So everybody's internal biases and perceptions are going to feed into that. And it's not to say it in a negative way. I don't think it's malicious. It's just the way they view it. They see Tennessee and Ohio State and Michigan and Georgia and Clemson. They just feel like they're better teams. And I think the recruiting rankings and the talent on the roster plays into that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we're here joined by Sam Kahn of The Athletic, and fired up to have Sam with us. His Texas Tech, what appears to be Texas Tech colors, notwithstanding. Excited to have you here.
It's maroon.
Okay, maroon. All right, we'll give you a pass. You're right. You are the tech expert at The Athletic and understand this state really well from a brand's perspective. You mentioned brand earlier, and Texas recruiting is really what it's about when we talk about these two schools. How, throughout the state, how do you feel these two schools with the new staffs have been received, and sort of from a brand recognition standpoint now with these two new coaching staffs?
No, I think it's been really good because you've got 2 coaches who are very front-facing to the public. Sonny Dykes has been very open with his program. Obviously, a change from the previous regime, which was very closed off. So you're getting glimpses of the program inside. Obviously, Sonny's got a high school background himself. He's got a deep pedigree because his father obviously was a coach at Texas Tech. So he's been around this state. He knows the high school coaches. They recruited Dallas in such a way at SMU that they've really ingratiated themselves with high school coaches. Then you've got Joey McGuire on the other side, who is like a de facto spokesperson for the Texas High School Coaches Association and has turned his program into that, hiring a bunch of former high school coaches on his staff. And they're the same thing, open door policy for guys. They'll have high school coaches come whenever, and Joey is beloved by so many guys across the state because of what he did at Cedar Hill and then the roles he had at the THSCA. And so the energy that Joey has brought to Texas Tech has really charged up that program. So you've got 2 programs who I think are really well positioned for the future of this conference. in the very first year of new regimes, and I think that you can't have anything but a positive outlook because of the way they've recruited both of these programs have, and the way they've shown some early first-year success that maybe people didn't expect.
Yeah, personally, I think it's really good for the state, right? I mean, for high school football as well, you talked about the open door policy at both programs and getting out there and really ingratiating themselves with the high school coaches, from both ends. So I agree with you. I think it's been something that's really good, another layer of something good for Texas high school football.
Talked about branding, the future of the Big 12. It will be positioned from a marketing standpoint, from a perception standpoint, because you're adding 4 new teams, you're subtracting 2 legacy teams. If we're talking about perception being reality when it comes to college football playoff, will the Big 12 still be in a position of power and influence?
I think it will, and I think, and Brett Yormark, kudos to the Big 12 commissioner who's here today. Getting that TV deal locked in when he did and getting to it before the Pac-12 did, I think was huge in the grand scheme of things. It secures their future at least for the next 6 years. And then you look at how the fun football that we've seen in this conference. It's a deep conference with no easy wins. And I think you lean into that. You lean into how fun these teams are, how wide open some of these teams are, the creative nature that you see of football from some of these teams. The only way that I think you can get further than that is recruiting. You're going to have to bring in higher level players, but as the TCUs rise up in stature, Texas Tech rise up in stature with the absence of a Texas and Oklahoma, I think that you're going to be able to improve the recruiting, and I think you've seen it with both of these programs so far. And then of course the basketball is going to be top notch. So I think you lean into what works for you and what people look at your conference right now. And right now they look at the Big 12 as a deep, fun conference. I think you lean into that, and I think that's going to be positioned pretty well. But having that media rights still secured is vital to this process.
Yeah. Sam Kahn of The Athletic is joining us here on the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. Sam, before we let you go, I got to get your prediction and your thoughts on today's football game because they are playing a football game here today. Give me your 30-second breakdown of the game and who ends up on top.
I think it's going to be intense because these are 2 programs that are pretty familiar with each other, 2 coaching staffs that are pretty familiar with each other. I think you're going to see TCU start a little faster than they have, but I think Tech's going to stay with them shot for shot. I think you're going to see Baron Morton bounce back in a big way, but I think TCU comes out with the win. I think they go 9-0 before they go to Texas next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Sam. That's Sam Kahn of The Athletic. When we come back from this break on the Frogs Today pregame show, we're going to give you our final thoughts and our predictions from the Frogs Today staff. Welcome back into the Frogs Today pregame show presented by Veritex Bank. We are live here at Amon Carter Stadium, getting ready for the Horned Frogs to take on the Red Raiders. Jamie Plunkett alongside Marshall Newhouse, Coach David Bowden, and Coach Melissa Treebwasser here on the pregame set. Guys, we're right a few minutes away from kickoff, so I got to hear your final thoughts and your score predictions for the game today. Marshall, let's start with you.
Listen, I think at the end of the day, TCU has more talent. They are the better team, and I think I talked about it earlier this week. Turnover margin is going to come into play here. It's a beautiful day, perfect weather for football. If TCU does what they're supposed to do, there's going to be a comfortable TCU win. Texas Tech is formidable, but TCU is just a better team. My final score, 45-24 Frogs.
I'm with Marshall on this one. TCU is the better team, so we got to take away all the fanfare, the tickets, the whining about the tickets, enough about cacti emojis and maybe even tortillas being thrown around. None of that stuff matters today. I just think at the end of the day, there's just too many weapons for this TCU football team and too many holes in an experienced defense for Texas Tech, but one that just can't stop this offense. So I think TCU scores 42. We'll go 42, the late touchdown for Texas Tech, 42-21.
I think this is one of those statement games. We talked about national perception. We talked about brand. You've got the big stage. You've got the big dude Saturday. This is a game a lot of people are going to be paying attention to. Texas Tech knows that as well. I think that we're going to take the Red Raiders' best shot here at Amon Carter today. They're going to empty the chamber. They're going to do everything they can. But at the end of the day, talent does win out. And I think TCU is the better football team. Turnover battle is going to be critical. I fully expect TCU to win, but I think it's going to be a little bit less comfortable than everybody's hoping for. Give me TCU 38, Texas Tech 30.
Look, you can empty the chamber pretty easily when you've only got one bullet in it, Melissa, and that's what Texas Tech's working with today. Yes, it's a big energy game. Yes, big noon kickoff is here. The Fox folks are in here. They're getting everybody hyped up for this one. But let me tell you, TCU has not started off fast since the Oklahoma game on both sides of the football. Everybody that was chirping, Coach, you've talked about cacti emojis, we've talked about tickets, we've talked about everything. All of the noise was coming from the fan base that doesn't have an undefeated record. Because when your team's not winning on the field, you've got to find something else to talk about.
Yes.
TCU has high aspirations. Yes, the expectations might have shifted since the starting point of this season, but now they're focused on something much bigger than cacti and Twitter and getting distracted by rankings and all that other kind of stuff. So I truly believe that this is the week TCU starts fast and steps on the gas throughout the rest of the game. Give me TCU 41, Texas Tech 17. Frogs run away with it early and just coast the rest of the way.
I like it, man. I like where your head's at. That's good. So we don't have to break down emojis today, which is nice.
Hey, you know what else I like? Not a lot of red back here. So you can say what you want about Jeremiah Donati's plan, but I think it worked.
You know, the Keep It Purple plan kept it purple. Who would have thought?
He told us he works for TCU, and that is true. He does not work for anyone else.
This has been the Frogs Today pregame show live at Amon Carter Stadium, presented by Veritex Community Bank. Come right back here after the game for the post-game show presented by the finest firefighters moving company. Melissa, Coach, Marshall, they'll all be here to walk you through the final results after the TCU Horned Frogs take on and hopefully beat the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I'm Jamie Plunkett for Marshall, Coach.